everybody. Welcome. Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Leperati. I'm Associate Director of Alumni Relations here at Baruch College. Pleasure to have you all with us this evening. This should be a super interesting event. Please put in the chat where you're Zooming from. I'm Zooming from Queens. Hope that you're cozy wherever you are. It's rather cold and snowy out there. Let me know how the snow is over by you too, because I'd be curious to know how everything's going. Hasn't been too bad over here yet, but as I was telling Alan before, the night is still young. It's supposed to snow all evening. So some quick ground rules for this evening. You can leave your camera on if you'd like. We like to see people's smiling faces as our audience, but definitely mute your microphone so that we don't have any ambient noise getting in the way. And throughout the presentation, feel free to put questions in the chat bar, and Alan will answer them throughout as he goes along. Of course, throughout, I will also be monitoring the chat as well. So definitely put any questions or comments there. And at the end of the event, we will make sure we tackle any questions that we didn't get to earlier. So a little bit about Alan, our speaker this evening. We've been hosting a number of financial literacy workshops over the past couple of semesters, hosted by Alan, where we've been exploring a lot of different topics: retirement planning, stock market investing, buying or renting a home, and more. Alan is a graduate of Baruch who realized after getting his first job that he actually had very little idea how to manage his own personal finances. He comes from a low-income immigrant background and made it his goal to educate himself on these types of issues and share that knowledge with Baruch students and alumni. He has a finance blog, which I will link to in just a moment. He's a software engineer by day for Rent the Runway. We actually also just featured Alan in the alumni magazine. So when you get that in the mail in the next week or two, you will see a nice profile of Alan in there and learn more about him. So a little bit about this evening's event. We're going to be talking about estate planning. And in particular, many of the people on the call this evening are those who graduated in the 2000s and recently. And this is a topic that a lot of recent graduates are not necessarily thinking about. So Alan's going to be able to give some insight into why it's never too early to start thinking about these questions, and also share some of the insight that he's gained from having his own journey of figuring this out. So again, please feel free to put all questions and comments in the chat. We'll get to them throughout. And I now present to you Alan Chen.
Thanks, Greg. I really do appreciate that introduction. And just so everyone knows, I'm in Queens. It's not snowing too bad yet, but I hear it's going to get worse. So I hope everyone stays safe at home and warm. Now, just to jump right into it, welcome to the Financial Literacy Workshops. As Greg has mentioned, I usually give these workshops on a monthly basis in the fall and spring semesters to both alumni and students, and also run a blog on the side to moonfund.com, where I write about personal finance and retirement. So if you're interested, check it out, and hopefully you learn a thing or two. All right. So today we're going to be talking a little bit, more of a morbid topic, a departure from most of our previous topics where we talk about investments and whatnot. And it's a scary thought, right? The idea of passing away. And strangely enough, there are financial consequences to worry about when it comes to that. You don't have to worry about it anymore, but your spouse or your children or anyone that you decide to pass on your belongings to and your assets will have to worry about it. The purpose of this webinar is really to talk about several topics related to estate planning and how to protect our loved ones from avoidable and additional emotional distress that is related to the financial impact of our passing. Right? The goal isn't that you come out of this and you know everything you need to know about estate planning. It's more of to get us started, right? Kick us off. What do you need to know to really start that journey and begin to learn more about it. So more information about who I am on top of what Greg has already said. I am a Baruch graduate. I graduated in 2017, right? So very recent. And I took a great interest in financial literacy for several reasons. One of the big ones is that I come from a low-income immigrant background, right? So that's a lot to unpack there. But if you're low income, you generally do not have conversations about money because there wasn't a lot of it, right? Your parents didn't know enough about it. probably didn't have a retirement plan, right? It's there's a lot of responsibilities that are on you once you graduate, and you're the first graduate to come from college. You have to learn everything about financial literacy, manage debt, manage your own money, and so on. Right. So a lot of that had to do myself, and had to do with talking to friends, professionals, and whatnot. And immigrant background is another whole layer to unpack, right? If your parents don't know English, right, chances are, that's the case if you come from an immigrant background, and it becomes very difficult to understand what's going on there. I need to speak more slowly and enunciate. Let me check if my mic is okay. Okay, should be fine. I'll try to slow down for us. All right. So one thing I want to just touch on before I jump into this is that I want to give a disclaimer out. Right. So estate planning can be very difficult depending on your background and how much assets you have. And one big thing is, I'm not your financial advisor, I'm not an accountant, and I'm not a lawyer. All right. So you're probably going to need all three to effectively plan your estate, right? If you really want to get everything in order before you pass away. So make sure that you reach out to the professionals when you do need them, and you do your own comprehensive research before you make any financial decisions. And like Greg mentioned, throughout this workshop, feel free to interrupt me. I always love to answer questions throughout this workshop. And if any of you have already done some estate planning, would love to hear from anyone out there as well. Just because the more discussions we can have, the better it is for everyone involved. All right, when we think about estate planning, right, you aren't thinking of me, right? I'm someone in my 20s, I'm married, and don't have kids, right? When you think about estate planning, the advice here is almost always, it's never too early to start thinking of estate planning, right? Most people will tell you that. And the world is a crazy place. It's unexpected, and it's been an unfortunate year for many people. People of all ages have passed away due to the coronavirus, and life is unpredictable. But we should be able to, confront our mortality as early as possible and make a plan with and for our loved ones. Someone mentioned you need an insurance agent as well. Yes, we're going to touch lightly upon life insurance because it will come up quite a lot. And whether it's for you or not, it's definitely a topic to be talked about. And then, what I first want to start off is, you do not have to be near the end of your life or have kids to begin working on your estate planning documents. Chances are, once you start them, it's going to be an ongoing process, sort of revisioning them and editing them as your life changes. And so I'm in the process of putting together my own estate planning documents, and I can assure you it's a lot of information and it's a very time-consuming process. It's not a simple, hey, I'm going to give everything to my kids or to my wife and call it a day, right? There's a lot more to think about and a lot more topics that you need to address besides just whatever monetary assets you have. Now, estate planning, when you really boil it down, it's about designating who will receive your assets and responsibilities after you pass away or are incapacitated. Right? Like I said before, we never know what's going to happen. So I do encourage everyone to start thinking about their estate planning as early as possible. Right? I like to think of estate planning as ensuring that your loved ones are taken care of and there's one less thing for them to worry about. Right? The most important thing is that you are as clear and detailed as possible in all of your legal documents, right? And they should be consistent, if anything. Now, estate planning, like I mentioned, isn't something that you set and forget. It's something that you're reviewing every so often to make sure that's up to date. Right? A good example of this is some people end up in a divorce, and what happens is that then they pass away, and some of their estate planning documents have their ex-spouse on them, and that may not be the intention when it should have been their current spouse. Right? So those are very important things to keep in mind. Your life does change, and who you want to leave your assets to will change over time. So just make sure that it's consistent with your current situation, right? Whatever that may be. So the first thing I want to talk about is inheritance. Now, this is a big one because it's the one that everyone thinks about, right? How do I make sure that my assets are distributed accordingly, according to my wishes, right? So it's a huge topic in movies. You see families fighting over inheritance. You see people disputing the inheritance, and you can think of it like legal documents were not updated or were not clear, right? While you are alive and capable, you should record all of your assets from your 401k, investment accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts, real estate, and life insurance policies, right? And any other item that has value, and you should figure out how to distribute them, right? So it's a list of items. You want to figure out who gets what, basically, when it really comes down to it. And you do not need to have a will. Well, if you do not have a will, is what I'm going to say, then inheritance becomes complicated, right? Because then the state determines how your assets are distributed, and usually, it's your immediate family members, but it will vary from state to state. Dying without a will is referred to as intestate. So you do not want to let your state dictate how to split your inheritance because it may not be what you want, right? So make sure the very minimum you have a will. Now, taxes are another big thing here. There are tax benefits to correctly planning your estate, especially if you are a high income earner or if you are passing away with a large number of assets. Right? So most of you are going to accumulate wealth over your period of your career, and likely in the millions, right? Just for if you're an educated graduate, you're going to be heading that path. And this is where you want to bring in the pros, right? This is where you think about, hey, who's my lawyer? Who's my accountant? How can they figure out how to minimize the taxes on my assets? Right? Because you want to make sure as much of your assets as possible goes toward your inheritors, right? Or your immediate family members. You don't want to, pay the government any more than you need to, as it is, right? And wealth is taxed heavily on a federal and state level if you aren't too careful when it comes to estate planning. And last thing here is directives, right? Directives is a little bit more complicated. It's because there's many directives and there's a lot of them. But basically, directives are a set of legal documents to notify authorities of your wishes for the end of your life, right? And who is able to make those decisions for you if you're unable to do so yourself. All right, we're going to talk about the 3 most common directives just in a little bit when it comes to estate planning, just to get us started and get us thinking about what documents we should have in place. All right, so before we dive into that, a big thing here is avoiding probate court. Now, for those of you who don't know what probate court is, basically this is what happens is if you die without a will, your assets are basically frozen, and you will need to go through the court system for them to be distributed, right? But if you happen to die with a will, you still have to go through the court system to for them to validate your will, right? For them to say, hey, it's accurate, it looks good. Let's just distribute the assets as they mentioned, right? You can avoid this, avoid the court altogether by just establishing a living trust, which is one of the directives we're going to talk about. So a will is not enough. You have a will, great, but you need to go one step further if you want to avoid the court system. Right? And really the last thing you want to do is have your loved ones deal with the court system and all this bureaucracy. It's never fun, it's stressful, you don't want them to go through it, right? And probate court can be expensive because you might need to hire your own lawyer to represent you, and filing fees can also be expensive, right? So probate process will vary from state to state, so there's a lot to think about there. Chances are you just want to avoid this altogether. Another interesting point is that probates are public information, right? So if you do have to go through probate court, everyone's going to know who's getting what and how much assets you had at the time of your passing, right? You don't want your financial records to be public information. It's not something that you want people to be looking up or Googling, right? Most of us prefer to keep our personal finances out of the public spotlight for many reasons. But if you go through probate court, you can't do that. And the last thing here is probate is very time intensive, and even more so in COVID. Right? A lawyer mentioned to me recently that due to the backup in courts from a lot of people passing away this year, it can take possibly more than a year to go through the process. Right? And this is important because if a loved one passes away unexpectedly, the bills do not stop, right? You still have to pay rent, you still have to pay internet, electricity, and so on, right? So this is very bothersome, especially if the assets are frozen and your spouse or your loved ones can't access those assets. So it's very important that you having a living trust in place so their assets are not locked away, they could be immediately distributed. And this is also a reason why joint accounts are very important. Right? If you want to have assets to be instantaneously transferred, just have a joint account set up. That way, if you do pass away, the person who set up a joint account will still has access to money and resources. Now, if you take nothing from this, from what I've said so far, this is the one thing you can do, the minimum, right? Is setting up beneficiaries, right? This is the low-hanging fruit that everyone can do. You don't need a lawyer, you don't need anyone here. You just need to have some conversations with your loved ones at a minimum, right? And beneficiaries are exactly what it sounds like. It's people you choose to benefit in your place in case something happens to you, right? So your retirement plans or 401k, IRA, insurance policies, right? Just make sure that these are all up to date with the correct beneficiaries, whether they're your spouse, your children, family members, and so on, right? Most platforms will allow you to select your beneficiaries online and will take at most a few minutes. Right? I've done all my beneficiaries. It took at most half an hour to go through all the accounts. Right? Just log on and just look for the button, and you should be set. Right? It's not too complicated. And also make sure to select contingent beneficiaries in case your primary beneficiary is unable to receive the benefits because they passed away as well. Right? So do not leave your beneficiaries blank or out of date. Otherwise, it will cause confusion during the probate process and may even conflict with other estate planning documents. For example, there are cases where your beneficiaries do supersede your will. Right? So just make sure everything's up to date and accurate. Right? One of the easiest things, this is one of the easiest things to do. So I would really encourage you, log on to all your financial accounts tonight and just set up the beneficiary section and make sure it's up to date. All right, let's talk about some of those directives that I mentioned and why they're so important and why you need them on top of your will, right? So, as I mentioned before, a directive is a legal document detailing your wishes on how you want your financial and medical decisions to be made when you're incapable of making your own decisions. Right? You want to provide some direction to your loved ones and then reassure them of your wishes and take the guesswork out of a highly stressful situation. Right? And in all of this, you should already have had conversations with your loved ones. Right? So none of this directives should be a surprise, but having them on paper does give power to them when they have to confront if how the assets should be distributed or what your end of life health choices are. So living trust, right? I mentioned before, you need a will, but you also need a living trust. And a living trust is that to ensure you do not have to go through probate court. Right? You select a trustee, someone to distribute the property according to your wishes. Right? It's recommended that your trustee stands to benefit from the distribution, right? So they're included in the living trust because then they will be motivated to distribute the assets, right? There could be an individual, multiple individuals, or even a trust company, right? Obviously, if you choose a company, you're going to have to compensate the company for their troubles of helping you distribute those assets. But once you pass away or become incapacitated, then your trustee will step in to distribute the property. In many ways, it is like a will, except you skip the probate process, and all the information is kept private, right? So that's one of the big benefits from this. The second one here is healthcare, right? This document becomes active once you become incapacitated. So you can appoint someone to make medical decisions on your behalf, right? This also authorizes medical professionals to release your healthcare information to relevant individuals, right? You should pick someone you have discussed heavily about your values and what end of life looks like for you. Right? You can choose to, write on your living will to specify scenarios and what exactly, how you want to handle that healthcare scenario, whatever that may be. right? You want to be as detailed as possible to give guidance and also give them the ability to make that decision for you. And the last one here is power of attorney. Power of attorney is a funny one because you don't have to be passed away to actually have a power of attorney directive, right? It basically gives an individual to act on your behalf, mainly for legal situations, right? You can specify how much legal authority they have, right? Depending on the type of power of attorney, right? It can take effect when you become incapacitated, or it can take effect before that occurs, right? With the power of attorney, the select individuals can sign checks, official documents, and handle other legal concerns. And for the most part, they basically take care of your financial and legal affairs. But definitely something that you want to have in place. Now, a will is definitely a tricky thing if you've never done a will before, but there are a lot of free tools out there to help assist you with that process, right? So here are a couple that I've tried myself. I'm not sponsored by any of these free tools, but I've tried them all. They're more or less very similar. The only exception being is that Tomorrow is only an app, right? So if you are not a fan of writing your will on an app, use other desktop alternatives. But I did discover that Tomorrow, has other options as well, including other directives, right? So this is strictly for wills. So like at minimum, you should have a will, but consider having other directives as well to just have a more fully thought out estate planning document set up in place. Now, basically, once you complete the will on any of these websites, basically you fill out a bunch of forms, your name, how you want to distribute your assets. And once you've done all that, then they basically send you a PDF in the email, and they tell you instructions on how to make the will official. Usually you need someone to witness you signing it, and so on, right? Just to make sure that people can verify this is indeed, you signing the will that you wanted. And directives, are a little bit more complicated. There are free tools online for them. Some of these tools here on the screen here do help you write directives, not all of them. But just keep in mind, last wills and testaments still have to go through probate court, as I mentioned, and you should have a living trust on top of that, right? But this also comes free with costs. But I always prefer to hire a lawyer when I draft these documents, because it's not going to always be very transparent what you're working with and how laws might change over time, right? So you want to have definitely a lawyer to review them, go over them, even if it's free. Right? There's a trade-off there. All right, someone mentioned, what's the difference between a living trust and a last will? You can learn more on the link that I have here. The slides will be shared. But just to give you a good idea, you want to have both a last will and a living trust. So a living trust, you get to avoid the probate court, right? So you don't have to go for the court. It's not time intensive. You don't have to wait for the court system to distribute your assets. A will, whatever you specify in the will, still has to go through the court system. And that information becomes public and so on. So if you want to avoid probate court, have a living trust. But a living trust alone is not enough because people can pass away at any time, unfortunately. So your living trust chances will not encompass all of your assets because you do have to update it all the time. A last will, you can say, hey, everything I own that's not included in the living trust should go to XYZ, right? So it's sort of, a catch-all. Other things you can do with last will is also specify if you have children, who their new guardian is and so on, right? So there's definitely differences between the two. And it's recommended to have both, right? Not to just have one versus the other. For the living trust documents, do you need to lawyer up to write it up? You don't need to lawyer up for any of these documents, but I would strongly recommend you to, or at the very least, write it and have a lawyer look over it, right? I think it's worth the money. I don't think it's a good idea to just fill in the blanks and say, hey, this is what it is. It looks good to me, because you never know, right? You don't want your family members to deal with the headache after you're gone. Actually, here's another question. If I choose my beneficiaries for 401ks, IRAs, but do not have a will, would it still have to go through probate court upon my death? That one I'm not too sure on, right? That one's a question I have to ask a lawyer. I would think that it might depend on the state if it has to go through probate court. But you want to make sure that you get all the legal documents, right? Whoever I specify my beneficiaries, I do specify in my will and my living trust as well. All right, cool. Someone mentioned, yes, spouses are automatically the beneficiaries of 401s unless they signed off. Yeah. So usually your spouse is the person who receives your assets if you pass away. Well, it probably depends largely on which state you're in. Look at that. Pensions, yes, not 401k. Can you have beneficiaries who live outside the U.S. and are not U.S. citizens? That's a good question. I'm actually not sure to the answer to that. I wonder if anyone in the chat might know. But if not, my guess is I don't see why not. But I'm sure the process is much more complicated than if you were a U.S. citizen, right? Can husband and wife have the same will or living trust? Why? I guess like you can, but is there a reason to have the same will and the living trust? I would say definitely have it separate because not all of your financial accounts or assets will be shared, right? For example, your retirement accounts are tied to a person rather than the family entity, and can't really be joint. Right, so try to have your own will and your own living trust, especially if you have assets that aren't joint accounts. All right, life insurance, big topic. I want to bring it up because people mentioned it before in the chat as well, but also because it does come up a lot, especially when you use these free tools. And the question really comes down to is, do you need life insurance? A lot of people are going to say yes or no, right? Because it depends, right? Some people swear by it. Others think it's just a major scam, right? I'm not going to say one or the other, right? I want you to really think about your own situation, right? No matter how you look at life insurance, the biggest factor to take into consideration is your family, right? And people that you leave behind once you do pass away. Right? And this topic is important because it can become a major part of your estate planning process, especially to determine who gets your life insurance payout. Right? It also comes a lot when you start using the free tools, like I mentioned. Right? But in the most simple terms, for people who are not aware of life insurance and how it works, you basically pay a monthly or yearly premium. And then if you pass away, the named beneficiary will receive a payout that was specified beforehand, right? So the higher the payout, the higher the premiums usually are, right? It's something to keep in mind. Now, the proponents of life insurance, usually life insurance agents, will ask us to think about our family, think about the kids. But one might also counter that point and say, what if you invested those life insurance premiums into the stock market or running your own business? Right? Can you generate equal or more wealth than if you just waited for the life insurance payout? Right? So life insurance isn't the only way to take care of your family when you are gone. It is one way, right? It's something to keep in mind. So life insurance, can be for you or it can't be for you, right? It really depends on where you're coming from, and you really want to think deeply about it. Then there's a debate about, do we want whole life insurance or term life insurance? I'm not going to get into it. There's a wealth of information online, and I really think you should, do research about what works for you because it's going to be different. It's going to be different for everyone, right? But I would say most people agree you do need some form of life insurance. if the loss of your income significantly impacts your family's standard of living. Right? For example, does your income contribute greatly to the mortgage or your children's college fund? Right? Are there no other assets lying around to supplement that once you do pass away? Right? Life insurance is complicated, but it can be tailored to your needs. Right? So, if you're confused, reach out to a life insurance agent, do your own research and then make a decision from there. Right? You don't want to say flat out, it's not for me, or, say, I'm gonna sign up for life insurance. Right? You want to do your research when it comes down to it. Someone asked, are wills null and void if there are visual edits? That's another big lawyer question about it. I'm not sure to answer that question. And I bet that it probably varies. But definitely I would say try not to have visual edits, right? I mean, I'm sure you're not gonna be doing last minute edits with pencil on your will. Try to go through the official process as much as you can. All right, estate taxes. This is a big one, just because there's so much information on it, and I'm definitely not the expert on this for a lot of reasons. One being that the laws are changing all the time, and to be an expert, you really have to be a professional in the space. But for the most part, estate taxes concern the wealthy. But don't forget that you could be wealthy one day, right? Throughout your career, you're gonna generate wealth, accumulate wealth, and ultimately, you may make a lot of money, and you may hold on to a lot of that money and hopefully pass it on to whoever you desire to pass it on to. Now, federal estate tax is 40%, right? Exemption for a single is 11.58 million. So if your estate is worth more than 11.58 million, then anything above that is taxed at 40%, right? Not great, but that's why you really want to get an accountant in here to figure out how you can reduce the amount of taxes that you pay. So I mentioned something very important for everyone. Just to go back to life insurance for a bit. Life insurance proceeds avoid probate no matter if you have a will or trust. So that's good to know, right? Definitely a benefit of life insurance. For the most part, I would say, a few states do have estate taxes. New York does, if you're curious. Their estate tax in the year 2020 is exemption is 5.85 million, the last time that I checked. And, an interesting thing to note is that your spouses are not taxed due to the unlimited marital deduction, right? So your estate could be worth $30 million, and none of that 30 million will go to taxes if your spouse is inheriting it, right? But really, if you think about it, it's just a form of delayed taxing, because ultimately your spouse will pass away at some point, and it may go to your children or may go to another entity. Either way, it's really a form of delayed taxes, and eventually it goes to someone that's not your spouse, and it will be taxed. Right? And again, like I mentioned, tax laws do change a lot. They've changed in the past 4 years, even estate taxes. So I would say find an accountant who specializes in this, and they can really reduce this headache that you will create, not for you, but for your family members if you don't do enough research yourself, right? So really make sure that you find someone that really knows what they're doing in this area, especially if your goal is to reduce taxes, and make sure that your inheritors receive as much as possible. Now, here are a few tips, right? So funny enough, I started my estate planning process using those free tools, but then I discovered that my employer offers a legal service as part of the benefits package, right? So it's paid legal service, but they're paying for it, so I might as well use their service, and all legal documents written while I am there are reviewed, and I get to keep them after, even if my employment is terminated or end my employment with them. So it's a nice service. Check with your employer if they offer a legal service of any kind, right? Sometimes it's intimidating to find your own lawyer, especially if you don't have experience in that area. So, your employer might have access to the resource and the network that you need to get started. Another thing is some employers offer life insurance and some of them offer it for free, right? So check in with your employer, see if you have life insurance. If you do, make sure that beneficiaries are up to date, and find out how much the life insurance is so you can do your own, you can accurately plan your assets if you do pass away, when you pass away. All right, make sure that you have an updated will, beneficiary, living trust, healthcare, and power of attorney directives. Right, just make sure your documents are updated. I know I'm stressing this a lot, but that's because it's important, right? Just make sure that you are updating them. Make sure that everything's official and squared away as much as you can, right? Someone is making an interesting point. If you wish to make a gift in your will to Baruch, the gift must be made to the Baruch College Fund, the entity that accepts gifts for the college. Yeah, so it's interesting because one of the ways to reduce your estate taxes is to give away wealth, right? So considering charity is a big thing. I think Greg, if you have a link, there you go. He's moving quick. But yeah, if you're thinking about giving away to the Baruch College Fund, consider it there. Personally, I haven't gotten to that part of my estate planning process, but it's definitely something to consider, especially, charity and, how you can help the world once you've passed. All right. And, another thing to keep in mind is you should make a list of all your assets and debts. You should always have a list of your assets and debts, but this is one thing you should do to make sure that, hey, am I being intentional with the assets that I'm giving away? And, are you making sure that you're giving away all the assets that you have and you're not overlooking something? And also your debts, right? Make sure that, your debts are going to have to be paid by your estate once you do pass away. So if your debts are higher than your assets, it kind of is a moot point because then you have nothing to give away if you're not smart about it. And the last thing is communicate with your loved ones, right? Nothing should be a surprise to your loved ones, right? They should know how much they're receiving, and what's going to charity, for example, and who's receiving what, right? So you should always be communicating what your directives are and your will with your loved ones because you don't want them to be surprised. That's the worst thing you can do. All right, someone mentioned, do I need a lawyer? Yes, you need a lawyer. I don't know how I can emphasize this point enough. You should lawyer up. It helps a lot to know what you're putting on paper and make sure that it conveys what you want to convey when it goes through the legal process. Because it will go through the legal process when your assets are distributed. You want to make sure that there's no confusion and there's no conflict in the documents that you're putting up there. And first thing to do is check with your company. Do they offer legal services? If so, go with them. Otherwise, you can always find a lawyer on your own or through recommendations, right? All right, that's most of estate planning. Now I want to talk a little bit about just, before we move on to that, let's talk about life insurance. So I mentioned life insurance offered by employers are usually there as long as you work with the company. When you leave, the plan usually expires. So make sure it works with your short and long-term goals. Good point. Yeah, good point. Life insurance does usually expire once you end your employment with them. So, you may want to find your own life insurance policy. Someone asked in the chat, who should hold a copy of your original will, a lawyer or the trustee? I would say no reason why they can't. I would say I would leave it with the trustee. I mean, you have to make sure the trustee is someone you really trust. But there should be multiple copies of your will anyway. All right, financial literacy coaching. Outside of all this, I do have expertise in other financial literacy topics, right? So if you're interested in having 30-minute sessions to just talk about your financial situation and for me to answer questions, I'm happy to do that. A few alumni and students have reached out, and I think it's been a very productive conversation in general whenever we have them. So, always happy to help in that regard. And the goal really is to teach you how to find information, not about, giving you all the answers, right? Because I can't be there all the time. If you really want that, you want to hire a financial advisor. But otherwise, I think most of financial literacy is something that you can learn by yourself and really, gain control over. But when you have something that requires expertise, you want to find a professional. All right, and again, like I mentioned before, right? Feel free to check out my blog. There are, I think, in my opinion, interesting blog posts on there. You can feel free to subscribe as well. If you are curious, this is what it looks like. Very simple. A lot of it is very number-based if you're interested in that, and very research-based. And aside from that, feel free to email me, right? You don't always have to ask all your questions right here and now or during financial literacy coach session, right? Feel free to shoot me an email whenever you want, and I'm happy to get back to you. And also my previous videos are located on YouTube. And I think Greg has other previous videos as well located somewhere else. But, they're available here on the Star Career Development Center. And they're available as a playlist, right? So, something if you're interested in my previous workshops. But otherwise, that's a wrap for the most part. If you have any other questions.
Thank you, Alan. Excellent, very interesting stuff. I know I personally have not thought about these types of topics. I'm in that demographic you referenced earlier of people who typically don't think about these things. So it's very important to have these ideas floating around in my head as I begin this journey. And very interesting to hear insight about your own journey doing this as well, Alan. And thank you also to our alumni. Feel free to put more questions in the chat. We're going to stay on a little bit longer. And as well, message me if you have any ideas for things you'd like us to topics you'd like us to cover next semester, because Alan and I hope to do some more of these financial literacy workshops. We've really enjoyed discussing these topics throughout the past couple semesters and are curious to know what you're interested in hearing about next year. I'm also going to put in the chat a playlist of some of the Baruch Alumni Relations career webinars that you can take a look at, various topics, including Alan's financial literacy workshops. And I believe also, Alan, someone had asked if you could put the link to schedule a appointment with you in the chat so they can click on that.
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that. So it's right here. Feel free to pick whatever time is available. If no times work for you on this, feel free to shoot me an email, right? I'm happy to work something out between the two of us if that comes up. Yeah, so let the questions come if you have them. Someone actually sent a link to New Jersey's inheritance estate. So I am going to click on the link because I am curious.
Excellent. And as we say throughout these financial workshops, Alan is not a professional financial planner. He's just someone deeply interested in these topics and someone who, after graduating, realized he wasn't equipped to really, to really successfully think through these topics. So we're sort of benefiting from Alan's own research. But as always, these are a conversation. So it's great to hear the insight from alumni who tuned in, who have their own expertise and their own knowledge about things as well.
For sure. I definitely welcome, discussions of any kind. And I definitely appreciated a lot of, a discussion about life insurance. I'm sure there are life insurance experts on this call. So, happy to have your input. I'm sure it helps everyone as well.
Well, it's making me think that maybe life insurance should be a topic we cover more in depth in a future workshop next year.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely something to consider.
Appreciate all the comments coming in from alumni who have enjoyed this session. Really appreciate everybody's engagement and questions. This is
Yeah,
one of the last events that Alumni Relations is hosting for this calendar year. So,
yeah.
we're definitely going to be sharing some news about more events in the near future. Hope to see you guys in 2021. Oh, I see we have a question here. Will you share this slide deck? And great point. I don't think I mentioned this, but we do share the slides. We also share a recording of this after we're done. And we'll get the recording up on YouTube as soon as we can, so we can also include it as part of our playlist of career and financial literacy workshops.
Does Baruch have an investment club for alumni? If they did, I would be happy to join one. I know they have a real estate club, but I don't know if they have an investment club for
Let me
alumni.
see what we have. We have quite a few different groups, especially online. So let me make sure I can figure this out and get back to you with some concrete information.
Yeah, that'd be very awesome. Someone mentioned the topic that we should consider is saving for retirement, IRAs and 401ks. We've actually have done a presentation for that before. So maybe we can consider bringing old presentations back to life. Or you can probably find them in the videos that Greg shared.
What I'll do is I'll share in our follow-up email to everyone who attended. I will also share links to all the previous workshops we've done, which include how to plan for your own retirement as a recent graduate and young professional, as well as how to help your parents retire, specifically aimed at the children of immigrants who might need to sometimes are considered the retirement plan for their parents.
Yeah.
So we will definitely share links to those webinars as well.
For sure.
Thank you, Jackson. Happy holidays to you as well.
Yeah, happy holidays.
So if there are any further questions, anyone? Student debt. Yep.
Yes, that's a big one. I have that on my list, so I'll definitely take a look into that. Have I done a topic on debt reduction? I've done a topic on paying off your debts effectively, but not necessarily about reducing your debt. I'm thinking like I think you're talking about calling or finding ways to talk with your debtors to figure out how you can reduce your debt, right? On what is already in collections or out there, right? Or how you can reduce your interest rate. So that's what I think you're talking about. But I haven't done anything about that. But I've talked about how to pay off your debt, right? So maybe that's a different topic we could definitely explore.
Oh, the home buying process. Monica,
so
thank you. We actually just did that. We had we had a presentation about buying or renting your home and which one works out best for you. Yeah. So I will definitely include that in our links as well.
Yeah, for sure. Another important point is that I guess we didn't talk specifically about the home buying process, which I'm hoping we can do more because I'm actually thinking about buying a condo next year. So once I go through the process and I faced all the mistakes and the burden, then I'm happy to share how that went for me in terms of like as someone who actually went through the process of doing so.
See, maybe we can do a live webinar as we go with you to look at condos.
The homes, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's gonna be exciting. Oh yeah, someone says See CARES Act and new law on student debt. Very interesting. Definitely check that out. They're having talks about more assistance in the Senate right now. So hopefully something good will come out of that. I'm gonna check out that after this presentation is over. Would it be beneficial to have a session on how gift giving from your parents can benefit your estate? Gift giving from your assets can benefit your estate plans and positively impact your income and your wealth retention. Yeah, I actually would want Baruch to give that presentation because I am curious to hear from them. Like if possible, I would attend that.
There you go. And we have that link that we shared earlier about how the Baruch College Fund is one of those charitable institutions. I'll share that link again here as well.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about that type of how it can impact your estate planning, charitable giving.
Yeah. Information on benefits of irrevocable and revocable trusts. Yeah. We should definitely talk about that. That was a as a more of the nitty gritty details, but definitely there are differences between them.
Let's see here.
Cool.
Well, I want to thank everyone for being with us this evening. Thank you as well, Alan. Really appreciate your insight and hearing from you. We will keep you posted about 2021 events. I hope everyone's staying warm and cozy this evening with the snow coming down. Everyone stay safe. Have a great holiday, and really hope to see you again in 2021. Have a great New Year's, everyone. Thank you again, Alan. Any final words?
I would say I'm looking forward to 2021. Don't want to look back on 2020. It's been a year, and I think we're gonna hopefully be in a surprise for many good things to come. And stay safe, stay healthy, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone. See you in 2021. Take care. Thanks for
Thank you.
joining us.